She thought she was marrying into billions, but the janitor she mocked was the Godfather who secretly tested her worth and already knew her darkest plan. Sandra Mensah had always believed that life rewards the prepared. She grew up in a modest home in Houston, where success was not handed out. It was earned slowly, through long hours and careful choices. Her mother worked tirelessly. Her father believed in steady effort. They taught her discipline. But Sandra learned something else as well. Effort alone does not always change your future. And she wanted more. Not just comfort, elevation. Not just survival, security. She wanted the kind of life where doors opened automatically, where respect followed her name, where money was never a question. Sandra was beautiful in a way that felt intentional. Every detail of her appearance was refined. Her hair always styled perfectly. Her clothes chosen carefully. Her smile practiced but warm. When she entered a room, people noticed, and she made sure of it. But behind the elegance was strategy. Before meeting Dominic Asser, she did not leave anything to chance. She researched him quietly. She studied his company, Asser Design Group. She read about his architectural projects, his property developments, his business partners. She learned his routines, his favorite events, and the circles he moved in. She discovered that he was respected, financially secure, and expanding quickly in Houston's elite community. Most importantly, she learned one name connected to him repeatedly: his godfather, a private billionaire philanthropist. Sandra did not ignore that detail. She observed everything. When she learned Dominic would attend a rooftop networking event, she made sure she was there. Not by accident, but by design. She chose her outfit carefully. She positioned herself where introductions would feel natural. She researched the guest list in advance so she would recognize key names. Was it wrong to prepare for opportunity? She told herself it was simply intelligence. When she finally met Dominic, it appeared effortless. A mutual introduction. A polite conversation. A contact that felt genuine. She asked thoughtful questions about his work. She listened carefully. She made him feel valued and understood. Dominic noticed her confidence, her intelligence, her warmth. He did not realize how much preparation lay beneath it. This is exactly where I need to be. Sandra knew how to balance ambition with charm. She never appeared desperate. She never asked direct questions about money. Instead, she expressed interest in his vision, his future projects, his long-term plans. She positioned herself not just as a partner, but as an asset. When Dominic smiled at her that evening, something shifted in his expression. He saw intelligence, not intimidation. He saw ambition, not insecurity. And Sandra saw opportunity. She understood timing. She understood influence. She understood proximity. But what she did not fully understand was this. Every move she made was being observed more closely than she realized. Because sometimes the most carefully constructed path still leads to a test you never expected. An ambition without authenticity can build success, but it cannot guarantee trust. When strategy replaces sincerity, even the brightest future can begin with a hidden crack. The proposal was everything a woman could post online and watch the world admire. A private rooftop in Midtown Houston. Soft lights wrapped around the railing. The skyline glowing like a promise. Dominic stood there in a tailored suit, nervous in a way that made him look younger, holding a velvet box that carried more than a diamond. It carried certainty. He told her she had changed his life. He said she made him feel understood. He said he could not imagine building anything without her beside him. And when he dropped to one knee, Sandra did not hesitate. Yes, she said, before he even finished the question. The ring was stunning, large, tasteful, expensive without being vulgar. Exactly the kind of ring that said security, not just romance. She kissed him. The photographer hidden behind the planters captured the moment. It was perfect. But later that night, when Dominic fell asleep with relief written across his face, Sandra lay awake beside him, her phone glowing softly in the dark. She opened her email. "Tiff," she typed to her college friend. "It's official. The ring is incredible. The penthouse view alone is worth the stress." Then she paused. The prenup conversation hasn't happened yet. I need to know what his long-term assets look like. Also, I still don't have clear details on the Godfather. If that inheritance flows down eventually, this changes everything. She stared at the blinking cursor. This has to be the smartest decision of my life. She hit send. To Sandra, this wasn't cruelty. It was planning. Was it wrong to think ahead? Was it foolish not to? She had seen too many women left with nothing but memories and wedding photos. But there was something she did not see. Dominic had begun to feel a quiet distance in her love. Not something obvious. Not something dramatic. Just small moments. The way she asked about property values before asking about his day. The way her eyes sharpened whenever his godfather's name came up. Kwabena Oye, the billionaire investor, the private man, the mentor, the mystery. Whenever Sandra asked about him, Dominic would smile gently and change the subject. He's hard to describe, he would say. But Dominic had started asking himself a different question late at night. Does she love me, or the life that comes with me? He hated that thought. It made him feel insecure, ungrateful. Sandra was attentive, polished, supportive in public. She played the role beautifully. Yet love should feel warm, not measured. A week after the engagement, Sandra casually brought up inheritance law during dinner. 2 weeks later, she mentioned asset structuring during a conversation about wedding venues. Dominic listened. He watched. He said little. And somewhere, beneath the sparkle of the ring and the glow of the skyline, a quiet crack began to form. Because an engagement built on performance may look perfect from the outside, but truth has a way of waiting patiently in the dark. A promise without honesty is just a contract waiting to collapse. The Oye Foundation Charity Gala was not just an event, it was a stage. The ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers. Waiters moved gracefully between tables dressed in white linen and gold centerpieces. The air carried the soft scent of expensive perfume and polished wood. Conversations floated lightly, filled with business deals disguised as small talk. And Sandra Mensah arrived ready to perform. Her gold dress fit her like it had been poured onto her skin. It cost $4,000, a number she would never say out loud, but one she carried like quiet armor. Her hair fell in smooth waves over her shoulders. Her makeup was flawless, her smile practiced. When she stepped into the room beside Dominic, heads turned. For a moment, she simply stood there, allowing the attention to settle. She adjusted her posture slightly, placing one hand lightly on Dominic's arm. Supportive, elegant, perfect. This is where I belong. Dominic introduced her to developers, investors, board members. Sandra absorbed every name, every title, every subtle cue about status. She laughed softly at the right moments, asked intelligent questions about projects, complimented a senator's wife on her foundation work, mentioned casually that she had always admired philanthropic leadership. She moved through the room like someone mapping a future. Was it ambition or hunger? Every handshake felt like a brick being placed in the mansion she was building around her life. She noticed which couples carried quiet power and which ones were simply loud. She observed who deferred to whom. She calculated alliances in seconds. When someone mentioned Kwabena Oye's influence in Houston's real estate expansion, her attention sharpened. That's Dominic's godfather, she said with a warm smile, as if it were an affectionate detail, not a strategic one. Oh, you're very lucky, someone replied. Sandra tilted her head gracefully. I know, but inside she was still searching. She had never actually met the godfather. He was always described as private, elusive, powerful. She scanned the room discreetly. Which man here held billions quietly? Which face carried that kind of authority? The music swelled gently as dinner was announced. Sandra took her seat at a table near the front. Prime position, exactly where she had hoped to be placed. Dominic leaned close to her and whispered, "You look beautiful tonight." She smiled at him, touching his hand lightly. "Thank you." And for a fleeting second, something real flickered in her chest. A soft warmth, a small doubt, but it passed. Because tonight was about elevation. Tonight, she felt untouchable. The lights were bright. The applause was loud. The world felt perfectly arranged around her. She did not know that the same room she was conquering was quietly observing her in return. Because when appearances rule the night, character waits patiently for its turn in the spotlight. The room you think you control may already be judging you. It happened in less than 30 seconds. Sandra was standing near the service entrance, a glass of champagne balanced perfectly between her fingers, laughing softly at something one of Dominic's colleagues had just said. The conversation was light, polished, effortless. Then she noticed him, a janitor pushing a cart slowly along the wall. His uniform was simple, his movements careful. He kept his eyes lowered, focused on adjusting a tablecloth that had slipped out of place. He looked ordinary, out of place against the glittering gowns and tailored tuxedos. Sandra felt a small irritation rise inside her. The cart was slightly blocking the path behind her table. The man was moving slowly, deliberately, as if unaware that important people were trying to enjoy their evening. Without thinking, or perhaps thinking too quickly, she leaned closer to him. "Shouldn't you be moving a little faster?" she said lightly, but loud enough for the two women beside her to hear. "At this rate, the party will be over before you finish." The women laughed. Encouraged, Sandra added with a faint smile, "But I suppose this is probably the most exciting place you've ever worked." More laughter, the kind that floats in the air for a second too long. The janitor looked at her. Not angry, not embarrassed, just looking. His eyes were calm behind simple wire-rimmed glasses. He studied her face carefully, as if memorizing something. Then he nodded once, quietly. "Yes, ma'am," he said softly, and he went back to adjusting the tablecloth. That was it. No argument. No visible hit. No scene. Sandra turned back to the group, satisfied by the small spark of approval she had received. Some people just need to be reminded of their place. The conversation resumed. The champagne sparkled. The music continued. But something subtle had shifted. The janitor did not rush away in humiliation. He moved his cart calmly toward the side of the room. His posture remained straight, his pace steady, and though no one noticed, his eyes missed nothing. He saw how Sandra clung to Dominic's arm. He saw the way she scanned the room when powerful names were mentioned. He saw the performance. Most importantly, he heard the tone in her voice, the confidence that came from believing someone beneath you does not matter. Was it just a careless joke? Or a glimpse into her true heart? Sandra did not think about him again. Not when dinner was served. Not when speeches began. Not when applause filled the ballroom. To her, he was a minor inconvenience. Background figure. A detail. But sometimes the person standing in the background is the one holding the entire stage together. And sometimes, the quietest witness becomes the loudest revelation. The way you treat the invisible is the clearest mirror of who you truly are. The lights dimmed slightly as dessert plates were cleared away. A soft chime echoed through the ballroom, and the master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage with a polished smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began warmly, "before we continue, we have a very special surprise tonight." Sandra adjusted in her chair, crossing her legs elegantly. She assumed it would be a celebrity donor or a politician. She lifted her glass casually, prepared to clap on cue. "The man who personally funded every dollar of this gala," the host continued, "the founder of this foundation, whose name is on this building, a man who prefers humility over headlines." A ripple moved through the crowd. Sandra's attention sharpened. "Please welcome Mr. Kwabena Oye." For half a second, nothing happened. Then, from the side of the room near the service entrance, a familiar cart rolled quietly to a stop. The janitor straightened up. Sandra felt her breath catch. He reached for the edge of his vest, unfastened it calmly, and handed it to a waiting assistant. Underneath was a simple, perfectly tailored dark suit. He adjusted his glasses, smoothed his beard lightly, and then he walked toward the stage. The room erupted. 500 people rose to their feet in applause, some cheering, some smiling with admiration. Board members stepped forward eagerly to shake his hand. Sandra did not stand. She could not. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her champagne glass. The sound of clapping felt distant, like it was happening underwater. No, that's not possible. The man she had mocked, the man she had dismissed, the man she told to move faster. He stepped behind the microphone with calm confidence. "Thank you," he said gently. "Please sit down. I am just a man who used to mop floors." The crowd laughed warmly. But Sandra heard something else in his voice. Memory, power, control. He was not embarrassed, not angry, not small. He owned the room without raising his volume. Sandra's heart began to pound. Heat rushed to her face as the words she had spoken replayed in her mind, louder than the applause. "The most exciting place you've ever worked." Around her, people leaned forward with admiration, hanging on to every word he spoke about community, opportunity, dignity. Dignity. The word struck her chest like a stone. She turned instinctively to grab Dominic's arm for stability. His chair was empty. Her eyes searched the stage again, and there he was. Dominic stood beside Quabina, smiling, shaking his hand with familiarity, respect, affection. They were not strangers. They were family. The realization did not hit her all at once. It unfolded slowly, like a curtain being pulled back inch by inch. He knew. Dominic knew. The Godfather she had been so eager to measure had been standing inches away from her all night, watching, listening, testing. Was this coincidence or consequence? Sandra's legs felt weak as she sank back into her chair. The room that had felt like her kingdom just an hour ago now felt like a spotlight she could not escape. And at the center of it stood the man behind the cart, the billionaire she never bothered to see. Never underestimate the quiet person in the corner. They may own the entire room. The applause from the ballroom still echoed faintly through the hallway as Dominic led Sandra into a private meeting room. He closed the door softly, not slammed, not dramatic, softly. That frightened her more. Sandra's chest rose and fell quickly. "Dominic, I can explain," she whispered, her voice no longer polished. He did not respond immediately. He walked to the small table in the center of the room and placed 3 printed pages down carefully, aligning their edges with quiet precision. Then he looked at her. Not angry, not shouting, just finished. Sandra recognized the pages before she even stepped closer. Her words, her emails. "Tiff, I need to know what his godfather is worth before I fully commit. If the inheritance flows down, this is the best decision I've ever made. We should review prenup timelines carefully." The air in the room felt thinner. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely steady. 6 weeks, Dominic replied. 6 weeks. 6 weeks of dinners, of kisses, of wedding planning, of her asking about guest lists and honeymoon resorts while he already knew. He's bluffing. He has to be bluffing. But his eyes told her otherwise. "Dominic, those were private conversations," she rushed. "I was just venting. Everyone talks to their friends like that." He tilted his head slightly. "Do they?" The question was not loud, but it cut deeper than shouting ever could. She stepped closer. "Baby, I love you. You know I do." He inhaled slowly, steadying himself. "I wanted to believe that," he said quietly. "For a long time, I believed it." Her throat tightened. "But love doesn't calculate exit strategies," he continued. "Love doesn't measure a person's value by inheritance charts." Silence settled between them. Outside the door, laughter floated through the hallway. Inside, something permanent was breaking without sound. "You went through my emails?" she tried weakly, grasping at defense. "They were sent to my godfather's office anonymously," he said calmly. "He gave them to me. He told me to decide for myself." "And you decided this?" She gestured helplessly at the pages. "I decided I deserve someone who chooses me, not my assets." The words landed heavier than anger ever could. No yelling. No insults. Just truth. He walked toward the door, then paused. "The wedding is canceled," he said. "Your things are already moved to the guest room. I would like you to be out by the end of the week." The finality in his tone left no room for negotiation. "Dominic, please," she whispered. He turned back to her one last time. "I loved you," he said simply, past tense. And that was the loudest sound in the room. The door opened, then closed. Sandra stood alone with 3 pages of ink that suddenly felt heavier than gold. Was it the exposure that hurt, or the realization that she had mistaken strategy for strength? For the first time, there was no performance left to hide behind. Only consequence. When love becomes a transaction, the heart is always the first thing to lose value. The door to the meeting room opened again, but this time there was no music, no applause, no performance. Quabina always stepped inside calmly. Sandra looked up at him, still standing near the table where Dominic had left the papers. The weight of the emails still pressed against her mind, but now something else filled the space. Silence. Quabina closed the door gently behind him. "May I sit?" he asked. His voice was steady, not cold, not pleased, simply steady. Sandra nodded. He sat across from her, resting his hands lightly together. For a moment he did not speak. He simply observed her, not as a billionaire, not as a test, but as a human being sitting in regret. "I want you to understand something," he said finally. Sandra's eyes were glossy, but she stayed quiet. "The man you spoke to near the service entrance tonight, that was me." Her breath caught slightly, though she had already known. "I do this every year," he continued. "I arrive early. I help set up. I push carts. I work alongside the staff." He leaned back slightly. "It reminds me where I came from." Sandra listened, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Quabina's gaze did not harden. It did not harden. It did not accuse. "I have been wealthy for many years," he said. "But wealth does not mean I forget the floor I once cleaned." He paused. "The comment you made did not hurt me." Sandra blinked, confused. "It was not about my pride," he explained gently. "I have spent decades building confidence. Words like that do not move me." Then his expression softened. "But there was a young worker behind me. His name is Marcus." Sandra's heart tightened. "He is 22. First month on the job. When you spoke, he heard you clearly, loudly, and he has been in the back of the house since then." The room felt smaller. "He did nothing wrong," Quabina added. "He was simply standing nearby." Sandra swallowed hard. "I didn't look at him." That thought settled painfully in her chest. Quabina's voice remained calm. "You did not speak to me as a man. You spoke to me as a symbol. And that is your choice. But Marcus is not a symbol. He is someone's son. Someone's future." He leaned forward slightly. "When we test character, we are not looking for perfection. We are looking for awareness." A quiet question hung in the air between them. "Who are you when you believe no one important is watching?" Sandra felt tears gather but did not wipe them away. "I did not arrange tonight to humiliate you," he continued. "Dominic made his decision after reading your words. That was his choice, not mine." He stood slowly. This night was not about punishment. He looked at her with steady eyes. It was about truth. Quabina walked toward the door, then paused. "If you wish to speak to Marcus before you leave," he said gently, "it may matter more than you think." Then he exited the room, leaving her alone again, but this time with something heavier than loss. Awareness. And for the first time that evening, Sandra realized the test had never been about money. It had been about her heart. True character is revealed not in front of power, but in front of the powerless. The corridor behind the ballroom was quieter than the rest of the building. The music felt distant here. The laughter was softened by walls. The air smelled different, more practical, less polished. Sandra walked slowly, her gold dress now feeling too bright, too heavy. Every step echoed slightly against the floor. Near the end of the hallway, she saw him. Marcus. He was sitting on an overturned crate beside a stack of folded chairs. A simple sandwich rested in his hands. His work uniform was still on, sleeves slightly rolled. His phone was in his other hand, screen glowing as if he was trying to disappear into it. He looked up when she approached. His expression immediately shifted to neutral, careful, guarded. The way young workers learn to protect themselves. Sandra stopped a few feet away. For a moment, neither of them spoke. This was not a ballroom. There was no audience. No cameras. No aplausos. Just two people. She felt her throat tighten. This is harder than losing everything. Marcus, she began gently. He waited. I owe you an apology. He did not interrupt. He did not look away. What I said earlier was wrong, she continued. Her voice was steady, but not rehearsed. It was unkind, and it was said loudly enough for others to hear. That makes it worse. She swallowed. I was trying to impress people. I was trying to sound clever. But there is no excuse for speaking to someone that way. Her hands trembled slightly, so she clasped them together. I am sorry, not because of what happened to me tonight. Not because I lost anything. I am sorry because it was wrong. Silence followed. Marcus looked at her carefully, not judging, just observing. Sandra wondered, would he laugh? Would he ignore her? Would he say something sharp? Instead, after a long pause, he simply nodded. Okay, he said. One word. No drama. No forgiveness speech. No emotional performance. Just okay. And somehow, that simple response carried more honesty than any grand speech could have. He returned to his sandwich, as if the conversation had reached its natural end. Sandra stood there for a moment, unsure what to do with the quiet. She had expected relief, or reassurance. Instead, she felt something deeper, accountability. There was no applause here to soften the impact. No wealth to fix it. No charm to redirect it. Only truth. Was this what humility felt like? She nodded once. Thank you for listening, she said softly. Marcus gave a small shrug, not unkind, just neutral. As she turned to leave, she glanced back at him one more time. He was still sitting there, eating calmly, existing without trying to prove anything. And in that simple image, a young man with a sandwich in a service corridor. Sandra saw something she had overlooked for years. Value without validation. Respect without recognition. She walked away quietly, the echo of her own words following her down the hallway. For the first time, she understood that apology is not about saving your image. It is about restoring your integrity. And integrity begins when pride ends. Real growth begins the moment we admit our words can hurt more than we realize. Sandra did not return to the penthouse. She did not return to the parties, the networking, or the life she had carefully designed. Instead, she drove to the one place that had never required performance, her mother's home in the 3rd Ward. The house was small, familiar, and quiet. When her mother opened the door and saw her daughter's face, she did not ask questions. She simply stepped aside and let her in. That simple gesture almost broke Sandra. At the kitchen table, under warm yellow light, Sandra told the truth. Not the polished version. Not the strategic version. The real one. She spoke about Dominic. About the engagement. About the emails. About the gala. About Quabina. About Marcus in the corridor. Her voice shook at times, but she did not stop. When she finished, the kitchen was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. Her mother placed a cup of tea in front of her. What do you do now? Her mother asked gently. Sandra lowered her eyes. I don't know who I am without the plan. Her mother reached across the table and touched her hand. You still have yourself, she said. The rest was borrowed. Those words stayed with Sandra. The next weeks were not easy. Pride does not disappear overnight. There were moments she felt embarrassed walking into simple stores. Moments she remembered the gold dress hanging and used in her closet. Moments she thought about the skyline view she no longer had. But slowly, something began to shift. Without the pressure to impress, she noticed people differently. She noticed the way her father used to greet workers at the car wash with respect. She remembered how her mother treated every cafeteria worker as if they mattered. She realized she had mistaken proximity to wealth for personal worth. 3 months later, Sandra accepted a position with a nonprofit workforce development organization in Atlanta. The salary was modest. The office was simple. The clients were workers trying to rebuild their lives. She sat across from them at small tables, listening carefully. When someone spoke about feeling invisible, she understood. When someone said they felt judged, she recognized the feeling from both sides now. Was this the life she had once imagined? No, but it felt honest. And honesty felt lighter than luxury. She worked hard, not to climb but to contribute, not to impress but to impact. On difficult days, she remembered Marcus in the corridor. She remembered Quabina's steady eyes. She remembered her mother's quiet strength. Sandra did not become perfect. She became aware. And awareness is the beginning of transformation. The penthouse was gone. The diamonds were gone. The title of fiancé was gone. But what remained was something stronger: humility, responsibility, and purpose. Because true wealth is not measured by what you own, but by who you become when everything else is taken away. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what truly matters.